Information here. I'm a teacher. Oh, more than so many people.
Thank you. Okay, let's try this again. Thank you, everybody, for being here today with us for this very important topic on school vouchers. Those that are here with us virtually, as well as those that are in person. This is a very important subject, especially during an election year, because we need to understand how public education will be affected by whoever wins this presidency. Today, those that are here, I would remind you to please turn off your cell phone, and those that are virtually, I would like to remind you to mute yourself. Unfortunately, one of our hosts, Sandra Miller, could not be with us today because she had a conflict in her schedule. But fortunately, we have Susan, who is an expert in this area. She is.
We have in the chat, someone's requested to turn up the volume. That's something we can do.
I will try to speak louder for now. So let me introduce our guest. Her name is Susan Spicker. She is a former high school English teacher. She became involved in education advocacy in 2011 after Governor Corbett announced his plan to cut more than $1 billion from public education funding. She served one term on her local school board in Shippensburg and has since been the executive director of Education Vouchers of PA since 2016. So without any delay, I'd like to pass it over to our guest, Susan Spicker. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. EdVoters has had a very long relationship with the with the American Association of University Women. We're super grateful for this partnership, and we know that many of your members are some of the best advocates that we have in the entire state. So we're just, thank you for having me come to talk about this tonight. I am going to get my screen sharing right here and then get started. Sorry that it's taking a second here. Right. Sorry that it took me a minute there. So we are here today to talk about why I think I might turn my camera off just because it seems like my computer's a little wonky. It's okay. Why school vouchers are a very bad idea for Pennsylvania. So just to start off with, I'd just like to talk a little bit about Education Vouchers. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We do not endorse candidates or get involved in any type of electoral issue. But we do really encourage people to understand education issues, understand what's at stake, and we really work with people to help them understand what's important and how to advocate for sound education policy so that we can build the public and political will that we need in order to have policies that are going to be positive for public education. We're the only statewide public education policy and advocacy organization in Pennsylvania. We educate individuals and organizations and our statewide network about education issues that impact public education. So we do a lot of advocacy training, we do in-person trainings, we create opportunities for advocates to talk to decision makers, we create fact sheets, we write research briefs, and we do a lot of work supporting advocates. So, our agenda today, we're going to talk about what are vouchers. We are going to talk about Pennsylvania's current $525 million school voucher program, why vouchers are a really bad idea. We're going to talk about what is happening in other states, and then how we can try to make sure that there's more accountability for the current voucher system in Pennsylvania, and how to stop any type of new voucher program from getting a foothold in the Commonwealth. So, private school vouchers have a lot of different names. The word voucher, when people hear it, they have a very negative connotation. And so people who support vouchers have figured that out. And so they try to come up with a lot of different names for them to try to kind of like trick people. So sometimes they're called education savings accounts, education freedom accounts, past scholarships. They really like the idea of calling them scholarships, but no matter what their name is, they're all vouchers. They are all programs that take public dollars out of a public system and put them into private hands. So in Pennsylvania, we have 2 voucher programs that have been around. The first one was founded in 2001, and they are up to $525 million a year that is spent supporting the private school voucher portions of these programs. So we have the Educational Improvement Tax Credit, which is available to all students who meet the program requirements, and that the program requirements are just a very generous family income limit. And then we have the Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit, or OSTC. That's available to students who meet the program requirements, and they also have to live within the attendance boundaries of a low achieving school as determined by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Students can get both of these scholarships combined. You don't necessarily get one or the other. You can get both. So we can see that we've had exponential growth in these voucher programs since 2001. They started out as a $20 million program, and they have exploded to $525 million in the most recent budget. The orange is OSTC, and the blue is the EITC. So there's a lot more money that goes to the EITC as opposed to OSTC. And again, the EITC is available to anybody. Doesn't matter where you live, it's available to you. And these programs are tax credit programs. So they work by a business will have a tax bill that's due. And instead of just writing a check to the Treasury, like we all do, and paying our taxes to the state, they write a check to a scholarship organization. And then the scholarship organization takes that money and then they give it to students as scholarships. The state then gives the company a 75% tax credit if they make a 1-year commitment, and then they get a 90% tax credit from the state if they make a 2-year commitment. It can also, for the people who are really good at accounting, it can be considered a charitable contribution, so they can get money back for that. And I think that there are ways that these businesses are able to actually make money on these when they do all the different types of write-offs that they use. So it is not a direct expenditure out of the Pennsylvania budget, but what it means is that there are $525 million that never come into the Treasury that are unavailable to be spent on anything else because they are diverted out before they even get there. And this program's been around for a long time, and it has a lot of very serious problems. It has been very, very under discussed since its inception in 2001. People kind of liked it. It wasn't that much money until the last 5 or 6 years. It was always had a lot of bipartisan support. But it's getting a new level of scrutiny because when you're putting $500 million into something, people are now starting to think about it a little bit more critically. So the funds in this program are not targeted to low-income students. So state law sets the family income limit of roughly 500% of the federal poverty level. So right now, this year, it's $142,000 for a family of 4, which is the highest family income limit in the nation for any state that has an income limit. So some states have just said we don't have an income limit, but if any state has an income limit, we're the highest. Discrimination is a feature, it's not a bug in these programs. So Pennsylvania law allows these private and religious schools that receive these diverted tax dollars to discriminate against students for almost any reason. sex, disabilities, sexual orientation, religious beliefs, socioeconomic status, gender identity, or gender expression. And then scholarship organizations that get the money are also allowed to discriminate when they hire their employees. There is no evidence that these vouchers over time have helped improve student achievement in Pennsylvania because it's prohibited by law for the state to ask for any type of student achievement data for students who are in these voucher schools, like prohibited. So you can't ask, so we don't know what their achievement is. So there's absolutely no evidence that this has like increased educational achievement. And then we also have no information about who actually benefits from the vouchers. So the law explicitly prohibits the collection of data that would provide demographic information about the students who get them. So like literally are not the Department of Community and Economic Development, which administers the program, is not allowed to ask that information. So we don't know how many people are low-income students versus how many families are pretty well off, and this is just subsidizing their tuition. We don't know how many people were already in private schools before they got a voucher. Like, we just don't have that information. There is no public scrutiny over this money. These dollars are diverted into private organizations. They have no public budgets, no public check registers, no public meetings, no sunshine laws, no right to know laws, no standardized tests. Like, we can't see what happens to that money once it goes into those organizations. And then there's also a lack of auditing, right? Like, there are never any audits of anything. So there is no way to understand like how the schools spend the money. And then these scholarship organizations that are like the brokers, they can keep up to 10% of that funding. And in some cases, they can keep up to 15%. If they can show that they spend the full 10% administering the program, they get to keep an extra 5%. That's down from 20%. It's only in the last year that they brought that down to 10%. They used to be able to keep 20% of the money. The reporting of how they spend it is a front and back document, and they don't really actually have to report anything. So we don't know like what they do with that money. And if we think about a $525 million program, that's up to $52 million a year. That is just unaccounted for. There's also no auditing process to ensure that income limits are enforced by the schools, right? So we can't do that. And there's no policing of side deals. So you could imagine that there could be a guy who owns a business, right? And his kid could be going to school and the tuition could be $40,000 a year. And he could say, I would like to donate $20,000 to the scholarship program, and I would like that to come back to my child. Does that happen? Like, we have absolutely no idea because there's no way to check for it. So these are like pretty serious problems in our current voucher program. But what I want to talk about is how much worse it could be if we had a different voucher program, which is what we call the cash handout voucher program. And these are the voucher programs that we're seeing explode all over the country. So these are different. This would happen, the way that these would work is that the Pennsylvania Treasury would be allotted in the state budget a certain amount of money. Or sometimes what happens is a state will say, there are criteria for students, and any student who meets these criteria can have a voucher, and they don't actually really know in the budget how much it's going to cost until the students come and claim the vouchers. So these cash handout vouchers, which we do not have yet, the Treasury has the money. They would deposit the cash into an individual family account that would be administered by a vendor. And of course, the vendor, takes a percentage of that money. And then it goes, then the family spends the money on whatever is an allowable expense. So, you would hope that the expenses would be private school tuition, uniforms, books, things like that. But what we've seen in other states is like private school tuition is one of the many things that people use their voucher money on. Sometimes they buy furniture or Disney tickets or kayaks or grills, you know what I mean? And so we'll get into that later. So with the cash handout voucher program, I do not love the EITC, OSTC programs that we have, but they are here, right? And they're not going to go away. And I think the best path forward with those is to just create more accountability in those programs and to like really try to make them as accountable as possible. Because with the tax credit vouchers, the cost is predictable. It's limited to the amount that the legislature allocates, right? Like you can only give as many tax credits as the legislature says you can have. The dollars flow to the scholarship organizations and the schools. They don't flow into individual people's pockets. And the legislature can choose to have transparency and accountability. When we get into these like cash handout vouchers, the cost is often dependent on the number of students. Eligibility can be expanded. So a voucher program could start off being tiny, and then each year they could expand eligibility, and it just could create enormous unpredictable costs. Once you get one of these cash handout voucher programs in, there's just unbelievable pressure to turn it into a universal voucher program where everybody would get a voucher. And when you put cash into accounts for individuals, it really creates like literally unlimited opportunities for like waste, fraud, and abuse, because it is hard to imagine that there would be an entity that could look through somebody's checking account to see how they're actually spending this money. Because once you put it in a checking account, it's kind of gone. So this past year, we've had a few bills in Pennsylvania that have like moved. Senate Bill 1057 is the Education Freedom Act. House Bill 47 was the Past Scholarship Act. To be completely honest, I don't pay that much attention to exactly what's in these bills because it doesn't matter. Whatever is in them can be changed at any point in the future. So if you have a tiny voucher program that has the best guardrails in place, that is very targeted to a very small number of students, and it gets enacted, that's fine for that year. But the next year, you know, you could get a different governor, you could get a different legislature. They could strip any accountability, they could expand the eligibility, they could put in new structures for giving families money, they could give new eligible uses for funding, right? So like once a cash handout voucher is enacted into law, what you can expect in your state is that it will eventually be expanded to be a universal voucher program. And we'll go through that. So there are a couple of people who really want to see vouchers in Pennsylvania. We know that Betsy DeVos is one of them. She has been focused all across the nation, and she really has spent money in Pennsylvania. And then don't know how many people around here know Jeffrey Yass, the richest man in Pennsylvania. He lives in a suburb of Philadelphia, and he's a libertarian, and like the core belief that he has about education is just that there should be no public system of education. And so he started in Pennsylvania really funding a lot of candidates. He's funded mayoral candidates in the school district in Philadelphia because they have a lot of control down there. And then this last year, he even gave like $6 million to Greg Abbott, who is in Texas, because like what he wants is vouchers for everyone everywhere, and he has unlimited money to spend on it. And so I don't know how many of you remember back to the crazy days of the end of June in 2023 when Governor Shapiro had negotiated a budget with Senate Republicans, and in that budget there was a small, limited $100 million voucher program. And the Senate Democrats said, or the House Democrats said, wait a minute, like we are not going to support that. Are you crazy? And at that moment, it was like a gift fell out of heaven. And it was this letter. This letter was sent to Josh Shapiro from all of these organizations that said, we think you should have vouchers in Pennsylvania. And who are these organizations? You know, every kid is Betsy DeVos. You know, the Commonwealth Foundation is funded by Jeffrey Yass. Excellent Schools PA. Like basically, if you want to find a group of organizations that wants to destroy public education, it is these organizations. And so this letter was sent to Josh Shapiro, and it was made public. And at that moment in time, when you got Alec, you know, and some kind of unsavory characters saying we want vouchers, it made the vouchers in the building toxic, right? And so at that moment in time, the House Democrats said, no way. And in the end, Governor Shapiro like line item vetoed the $100 million and said, we're not gonna fund it. And then we had our budget impasse because the Senate Republicans had a little temper tantrum, and then the budget got finished in December. When we went back to the budget this year, this past spring, Governor Shapiro said it's unfinished business. And then the voucher issue never really surfaced as like a very big issue as part of the budget. So I think it speaks to the incredible advocacy of many organizations and individuals who have said, like, we don't want this in Pennsylvania. And I think that that message was heard. So, you know, we'll go back to the landscape at the end of this. But I just want to go through a few, like, some more slides about why vouchers are a bad idea, just so that we can really fully understand this. So there have been vouchers that have been around for a long time in other states, mostly limited programs that are now expanding. And when researchers look at voucher programs that actually collect data about student achievement, they find that the impacts on student achievement are as harmful as natural disasters. So what you want to see is positive growth, like the growth for summer math programs, the growth for better math texts. But instead what you see is students who are in voucher programs, when they are compared to their peers who remain in the public schools, are learning less in Washington, D.C., in Indiana, in Louisiana, in Ohio. And then you look at, I think we all remember COVID and what a devastating impact that had on children. These voucher programs in some states are having an even worse impact on their students. In Illinois, which is the only state so far that has had a voucher program that then got rid of it, they had a 5-year tax credit voucher program, and it was set to sunset. And instead of renewing it, they just allowed it to go away. After they allowed it to go away, they found, a study found that the students who got the vouchers over those past 5 years, like, did not outperform the other students. Like, it didn't help them academically. In Pennsylvania, since we just don't have any information, but if we were going to look at national data, we could make I would say educated guess that we would be seeing the same thing here. I don't know what would be different about Pennsylvania. The real goal for these vouchers is universal vouchers. So you get the camel's nose under the tent, you get your little voucher program in with limited eligibility, and then you expand it. And so in no state have we seen that worse than in Arizona, but it's happening all over the country. So we can see in Arizona, they have blown a hole in the budget. When we look at Ohio, I think this is Ohio, they blow past the estimated spending. And then this is in Indiana. So they say, like, these people come in and these voucher proponents, it's only going to cost $15.5 million. Let's just put in this little voucher program. And then lo and behold, when you are offering free money to people, they're going to take it. And so the Indiana voucher program that they said would cost $15 million costs $300 million. Same thing in Iowa, right? So they come in, they sell you that it's going to be this small program, they expand it, and especially when you expand these programs to people who already have their children in private schools, you would have to imagine that if you already have your child in a private school, you are already paying your tuition, and someone offers you a check for $7,000 or $10,000, who would not take it, right? Like it kind of makes sense. So we can see in state after state after state after state that these costs of these programs have just exploded. And then, you know, again, who would have ever thought that most voucher recipients are wealthy families whose children have never attended public schools? That when these voucher programs are offered, if you are offering them to people who are already in private schools, they are going to take them. In Arkansas, I just feel like there are just a couple quotes from states where people have seen the impact. In Arkansas, 95% of the students who get the vouchers were already in private schools. And so, a public policy panel director said, I think it's just going to be a continuing expansion of subsidies going to urban families that were likely going to be in private schools anyway. I don't think a lot of families that end up taking advantage of those, they don't find the quality that they're looking for. There is kind of a limited number of high quality, really great private schools, right? And if those schools are already filled up with the kids that they have chosen, the schools that then pop up to soak up the new voucher money are not ivy covered, beautiful, well-established schools. They are like little pop-up schools, and that's part of the reason that we have this quality issue. In Northeast Ohio, they expanded the voucher program, and again, what they found was when they expanded the voucher program, the money got soaked up in the wealthy zip codes around, in the suburbs of the cities where all these kids were already in private schools. And then we see this again, even the Wall Street Journal admitted this. And then, Ed Week did a whole study about it. People aren't leaving public schools to go to private schools. They're just already in there. And then when we look at this, who's benefiting? In Pennsylvania, they always say, like, this is for kids who are trapped in failing schools. It is for the poorest of the poor children. These are kids that we need to get out of their schools. When we look at voucher programs around the nation, these voucher programs are not serving those children. And it makes sense, that if a voucher is not going to cover the complete and full cost of a private education, it is not going to be something that is going to allow the poorest of poor children to be able to access that type of school, right? So, and in Pennsylvania, like, we definitely don't make sure that money is directed to children who are in that situation. It's kind of a free for all for anybody. And so, just again, like, just to go over it, Iowa, Florida, Arkansas, Arizona, Ohio, these families are families that really didn't need the money. Like, they already had their kids there and they're now just getting the subsidy. In Pennsylvania, again, like, we don't collect data that would allow us to know how many kids are moving from a public school to a private school with our EITC, OSTC vouchers, and how much is just subsidizing kids who are already there. And then when you have the voucher programs that have been proposed, they are a first come, first serve voucher program in Pennsylvania. So the one that Governor Shapiro was going to sign into law, it says, like, we've got $100 million. First families that get it, they get it. Well, who is going to get that money, right? Especially if you are already enrolled in a private school, you're already getting your EITC, you're already getting your OSTC, you're going to be the first person in line to get it. Nothing said that this money had to be set aside for, like, the poorest children or for, children in failing schools. And that was the first bill. And so, they can come up with different voucher programs. I don't know what the next one will look like. Maybe they'll make that better, but that was definitely not the case. And so when we think about these vouchers, they reduce funding available for public education, and they totally increase pressure on property taxes to fund public schools. So when we've seen, as funding for vouchers has climbed in other states, they have pulled back on the amount of money that they are spending on public education. It makes sense. There's one pot of money, and when you start putting more money into one bucket, you're going to have to take it out of the other bucket. So it's not like there isn't an impact on public schools across the nation. And so we've seen, again, I keep going back to Arizona because it's like a tragedy that is unfolding in Arizona with this voucher program. They are trying to figure out how to deal with a $900 million voucher bill when they didn't have it in the budget. And so when you think about a state that really shouldn't be cutting support for worrying about its groundwater, I would say that Arizona is that state. But because they're putting all this money into vouchers, they are cutting funding from, like, they're worrying about things that, like, people need to survive. And so in Pennsylvania, I think you also all know that we have an unconstitutional school funding system. On February 7th in 2023, our school system, our state funding system for education was declared unconstitutional, and the judge said, Harrisburg must provide for every student to receive a meaningful opportunity to succeed academically, socially, and civically, which requires that all students have access to a comprehensive, effective, and contemporary system of public education. Every dollar, and so we've got a $4.8 billion gap between what we're spending now and what we need to spend in order for all these kids to have the opportunities the judge said they need to have. Every dollar that goes to a voucher is a dollar that is unavailable for that. And then I'm just gonna, like, take a moment and just talk about this issue of discrimination in these schools, because Ed Voters, we did a deep dive into the discriminatory practices issue, and I want to say it was a sobering couple months as we were digging through these private school policies. So we know, like in our brains, that private schools are allowed to discriminate against students, you know, basically for any reason. They can accept vouchers. They're not obligated to provide special education services or accommodations for students with disabilities or students who are English language learners. They can and do refuse to admit students who are LGBTQ+, who are immigrants. If you don't share the school's religious values, they don't have to admit you. They can refuse to admit kids because they're poor, because they don't like their parents, and they can refuse to enroll and retain students who struggle academically. Like, we've been saying this forever about vouchers, but then we at Voters did a deep dive. I can't get my screen to move. We did a deep dive into this, and I think that this writer here really expresses exactly what school vouchers do. When you establish two school systems, one that's public and one that's private, but they're both supported with tax dollars, what you're really doing is expanding the ability of the private schools to pick and choose the most desirable students from the pot. That is really what this whole voucher thing does. So we looked at these discriminatory policies. There are 800 schools that are listed as participating in the Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit Program, and we looked at roughly every fourth school, and we did a deep dive. We went to their website, we looked at their admissions policies, we looked at their handbooks, and we took screenshots of everything. So it's all in a Google Drive, because I think a lot of this probably got pulled down after our report came out. But we found that 100% of the schools that we researched had policies in place that could be used to discriminate against students, which makes sense because they're private schools. They're not open admission schools. And I just wanted to share a few of them with you, just to give us, like, because there's like understanding it, and then there's like seeing it with your own eyes. So there is the Cambria County Christian School in Johnstown. So they discriminate. So pregnancy and abortion is one of the big discriminatory policies that these schools have. So this school has written down, in the instance that a current student of CCCS should become involved in a pregnancy, the student will immediately inform the administrator of the situation. Parents will then accompany the student to the next board meeting to discuss conditions of continued enrollment. So a young girl who is pregnant has to go before the board of the school. Seems like a FERPA violation to me, but like, call me crazy, and explain to like this board of people that she is pregnant. And then in order to be allowed to stay there, she's not allowed to have an abortion. She must show repentance, and they have to agree to ongoing Christian pregnancy counseling, right? And I think we all remember when Josh Shapiro made the big deal about how they stopped funding the Christian pregnancy centers, but then we're going to fund private schools that force girls to go into that exact same Christian pregnancy counseling that I think many people understand is not the healthiest thing for a young woman. Then we have like policies about kids with disabilities. So the Al-Aqsa Academy in Philadelphia, the academy is not equipped for teaching students that might need special education or might have behavior problems. Students in need of special care are referred by parents or school personnel to the local public school district. So if your kid might be a handful in any reason, don't even bother to apply. And then the Cheswick Christian Academy, please understand that CCA may not be able to help the needs of learning disabled children or accommodate students having special needs. CCA cannot implement existing IEPs. And then there's like the poster child for all of this is, I would say, the Dayspring Christian Academy, which is in Lancaster County. It's received over $3 million in EITC, OSTC funding over the years. And it has some of the most like heinous language about LGBTQ+ kids that I have ever seen in my life. And Tucker Carlson came this past year and he was their guest speaker. And this is a school that soaks up a lot of tax dollars. And so you can see, like, we refuse our sole discretion to refuse admission of an applicant or discontinue enrollment of a student under such circumstances that include, but are not necessarily limited to, living in, practicing, condoning, or supporting sexual immorality, sex outside marriage, homosexual acts, bisexual acts, gender identity different from the birth, sex at the chromosomal level, promoting such practices or otherwise the inability to support such moral principles of a school, right? So even having a friend who identifies as LGBTQ plus can get you kicked out of the school. So they discriminate. And, you know, when we think about vulnerable kids and we think about the kids who they are saying they want to do these programs for, a lot of vulnerable kids are going to come in with academic problems. They are going to come in with behavioral problems. They are going to be like our most vulnerable kids. They're not going to be welcome in many private schools. There's also the issue of what these schools teach. So in Pennsylvania, religious private schools are not required by the state of Pennsylvania to be licensed or accredited by any state agency. Nothing. And some religious schools do have a curriculum that's like similar to a public school, but a significant number use a curricula that's based on like theological dogma instead of facts, including creationism is science and the Bible is literal truth. And the Keystone Research Center, which is my fiscal sponsor, they have a really long report where a woman went through the textbooks that are used by hundreds of private schools in Pennsylvania, and looking at the things that students are taught. And there's also a lot of stuff that a lot of not loving things that are taught in addition to really like non-science things. So the Dayspring Christian Academy, they've taken it down, but they used to have pictures of like dinosaurs and children, right? Like that is what these schools are teaching. There's a school that is like not far from where I live in Shippensburg, where kids go into a cubby. They don't even have a teacher. They have like a facilitator, which is like, that's a new thing that schools are doing now, where like kids come in and they have like a boxed curriculum. A lot of the curriculum is simply memorizing Bible verses, and they go and they sit in a cubby all day and they work on their own, and then they go home. And that's their education. And that's what these vouchers are supporting. And we don't have any way of like knowing the like their academic achievement. So we're gonna like go right back to where we kind of started with this whole idea of the waste, fraud, and abuse. So we can see in Florida, and I think we understand kind of like Florida's, you know, vision for education for a very long time has been to completely privatize the system. And they have a purchasing guide of things that you can buy with the school voucher money that you get. They have pretty much universal vouchers. They're like literally, people are literally allowed to buy TVs, paddle boards, kayaks, Disney tickets, totally allowed, absolutely fine, no problem. The dollars that you pay in taxes that are intended to be spent educating children. In Arizona, we found the same thing. I don't know that this was necessarily supposed to be allowed, but there was an investigation when people started like looking at like when people submitted their receipts, like what did we see? So ninja warrior training, martial arts training, passes to the Arizona Snow Bowl. There was like the lucky kids who got to do luxury car driving lessons at $835 a pop, right? This is how they're using their school voucher money. And in North Carolina, they had this voucher program, and there were all these schools that like actually never existed, right? So there was a reporter who's like, I don't remember there being a school at that address. And so the reporter drove and there was nothing there. And the reporter said, I think I want to look at this a little bit more. Like driving around the state, like just schools that like don't even exist, $500,000. And then there were people who were actually in the Department of Education. They created, I think, what did they say, 5 students? They created 5 fictitious students and like got their own money and took it for themselves. So that happened there. And now this is like the latest and newest out of Arizona, just in like the past couple days. So Arizona families can get these vouchers and they can hold them in their accounts. They don't have to spend them. They don't have to spend this money educating their kids. They can use it. They can save it for college, right? So right now, this was from September 19th. There's $360 million sitting in voucher families' accounts that is unspent. And so in Arizona, if you have a kid with a disability, you can get up to $44,000 a year for that child, but you don't have to spend it educating your kid. And so they have $360 million sitting in accounts unspent. What are you going to do about it? I don't know how they can claw it back. And then coincidentally, just a few days after this comes out, the Goldwater Institute, which is like a place where really harmful policies, think tank, very harmful policies come out of, they are now suing the state of Arizona to say that the Arizona government's requirement that parents provide paperwork showing how they spend the voucher dollars, that should be illegal. That is a bureaucratic, what do they call it? Bureaucratic hoops they have to jump through, arbitrary paperwork. You know what I mean? And so like now the state of Arizona is defending itself, right? Its ability to collect information on how people are spending education tax dollars. They have to defend this in court. And I have no idea what their Supreme Court looks like. I have no idea what their state courts look like. I have no idea what the outcome of this will be, right? But the ultimate goal for school vouchers is to take our tax dollars, to obliterate our public school systems, to just have those not exist, and to get these dollars in private pockets. And it's not an exaggeration. Like, I know sometimes we can sound like alarmist, but like we work really closely with the Save Our Schools Arizona people who are really working hard to like try to claw this back. This is what's going to happen in state after state after state when these vouchers come into them. So the really good news is that we are seeing many red and blue states are looking at this and they're saying, we need to put the brakes on this. This is not something that we want. So we saw Governor Whitmer back in 2021, she vetoed the voucher bills and they gave up. They said, there's no way that we're going to get vouchers through in Michigan, so we're going to walk away. Then we can see in Illinois, I talked about how they had a small voucher program. They let it sunset, and we have not seen a new voucher program introduced in Illinois. In North Carolina, there is already a voucher program in place that is being expanded, but the governor down there is now going on a tour, and he is talking about the importance of supporting public schools and really making that an issue with the voters of North Carolina so that they can understand like what is at stake. Idaho, which we do not think of as being like a liberal stronghold, they completely killed a voucher program. They said like, we don't even want this in our state. We leave it out. In Kentucky, they are talking about putting a ballot measure on. A lot of states, you know, they try to do these ballot measures. They're usually voted down, but the Kentucky governor said that he is going to campaign against it so that people will not vote for a voucher bill in Kentucky. In Texas, there was like just massive standoff between the governor and it was, you know, all the Democrats lined up to be anti-voucher. And then there were a lot of rural Republicans in Texas who said, what the heck is going to happen to our communities if we have vouchers? Like, we're so rural, the only thing we have in our communities are our little public schools. So if all this money ends up getting taken out of our public schools, like what's going to be left? And so Jeffrey Yass went down there, Pennsylvania's billionaire, puts $6 million in. A lot of the Republicans who opposed the vouchers actually got primaried out, and new Republicans who support vouchers got in. But what we're hearing from down there is that this rift with Governor Abbott is so great that even Republican lawmakers who were pro-voucher before, like not the newly elected ones that were bought by Jeffrey Yass, but the other ones are saying, no way, no how, we are not going to have vouchers in Texas. It's just become too clear to them, like what's going on. And so in Pennsylvania, like we just have a big question mark right now. And I think we'll know a lot more about the prospect of vouchers after the election. I will say Josh Shapiro recently was speaking someplace, I don't know where, but at the end of it, he said, I've always hated vouchers. I hate vouchers. I like scholarships. I think scholarships are okay. We already spend $500,000 on scholarships, and we need to make sure those scholarships are going to the kids who need them. So I am really hoping that Governor Shapiro has like kind of gotten a larger world view than he had when he first was elected, and that maybe he's going to be on the right side of this. But I think the big question mark is it was really the House Democrats with their one-person majority that kept the vouchers from being enacted into law. If the House Democrats keep that majority, I think that we don't probably have to worry about one of those cash handout voucher programs in Pennsylvania, at least for the next session. Now, if Republicans take over the House in Pennsylvania and there's a Republican-controlled House and a Republican-controlled Senate, I think we can be pretty sure that they will collectively pass a voucher bill. They will serve it up to Governor Shapiro, and then we're going to have to see what happens. So, you know, I think we're just going to have to wait and see. But in the meantime, we have 3 recommendations for Governor Shapiro and for the lawmakers. So first, before a single additional dollar goes into those EITC, OSTC vouchers, we really need to make sure that public schools are fully funded in compliance with the court order. So like we've got $500 million for public or for these private schools. Like they don't need any more money right now. Like that, there should not be any more of this EITC money until the schools are funded. We feel strongly that they should at least try to like put in law like explicit anti-discrimination protections for students so that any school that chooses to accept these dollars would have to say we're not going to discriminate. I mean, I think that's incredibly difficult to enforce, but if you say your values are you should be able to marry who you love and kids should be able to be who they are, those are values that I believe very strongly we should see coming out of Harrisburg. At least they should try. And then they need to enact legislation that will allow for the data, that will mandate the data collection, that will allow us to understand like who actually is benefiting from the current vouchers. It's really unacceptable and almost incomprehensible that all of this money has been spent and no one in the state government has any idea like really who's benefited, what's happened to it. So Governor Shapiro, never hurts to send him a text or give his office a call and say, we would really like you to really stay steadfastly opposed to vouchers. If you're not part of the Ed Voters Network, you can visit our website and you can just sign up for emails. We were heavily engaged in the voucher and other issues. And then I guess we can just stay tuned for after the election to kind of see what happens. So that's my contact information. I have a card if anybody wants it later, but I am now done. So I will stop my share. So are there questions? And I did see that someone put in the chat, like, what are the positive impacts of vouchers? Like, you know, I think that like for families that get them, it's very nice to have subsidized tuition. I'm sure there are students who otherwise would not be able to attend private schools, and it is a good thing for those families. I can just say in Pennsylvania, like we just don't have any data to back up anything. And so I think if these programs are really that effective and they are really that good, I think that our state government should, you know, really, and I say this sincerely, I'm saying this not like snarkily, but sincerely, like if these programs are really benefiting students, that is something that we should know, and then you know, make sure that the dollars are going to the students who are benefiting the most.
I raised my hand. I just wanted to thank you. I came into this thinking. Oh, can you hear me? Oh, maybe not. Okay.
And we can't hear you. Could you put your question in the chat, please? I apologize for this.
It looks like she's still there.
Is she?
Oh, yeah. She's still muted.
She's muted. You're,
I was unmuted.
and
So-
you're muted on your own. But I think she needs to put the question in the chat. Actually, I did have a question myself. Why give limits about how much a family could have? Like you said, we have the highest one as far as the tax, the vouchers are concerned. Why give limits if you're not even going to check to see if they're being followed?
Right, so I think it's like politically helpful, to be able to say, these are not for everybody, these are for kids who actually need them. But, you know what I mean, if there's no follow-up, and I'm sure, and I will say, I'm sure there are many, many private schools that actually really follow the rules and they check the income limits of families. But and any system rhetorically say that it's for families, for kids who need it, I think.
There's another question for you. What is the plan to get in front of local representatives to educate them on the 3 recommendations and Governor Shapiro, and also require audit and data collections? What is the plan of doing this?
So we, in the last budget season, we did a lot of work around that. So we did a petition and we sent letters and had people do the click and sign letters to the lawmakers. So I think we're waiting to see if, everybody's just kind of in a holding pattern, but when we get to the next, legislative session and everybody's sworn in and everything is settled, the Ed Voters definitely does letter writing campaigns, where we ask people to contact their lawmakers, and anytime that you can go in and have a meeting with your own lawmaker to educate them on this issue, I think it's really helpful. They are legitimately incredibly busy people with 1,000 different topics that they have to think about, and all these different interests and all these different constituents. And so an issue like school vouchers can seem to them to be a small issue. And they're not necessarily gonna dig down and understand especially discrimination that happens just because they're busy. So having a trusted constituent who's willing to spend some time going in to have a meeting is incredibly helpful. And I think it can really help change their minds. I was invited to talk to a Democratic Policy Committee hearing about the voucher programs, and I just sat and read policy after policy after policy, and they were mortified. They had no idea, right? And I can't necessarily blame them, because if somebody hasn't really told you, you don't really know. So I think that that's kind of the role that we can all play, is doing that.
There's another question, the question by Ann that we couldn't hear. She basically says that she'll follow Ed Voters. And what other organization would you recommend that she follows?
There is a school funding coalition called PA Schools Work, and we are one of the members of that. I would say PA Schools Work is going to have really helpful information about the budget. PA Schools Work is opposed to vouchers, but that's not the primary work that they do. The primary work we do in the PA Schools Work campaign is around ensuring adequate and equitable funding, but it's just paschoolswork.org. And there should be a little pop-up that comes up on your screen, and you should just be able to sign up for those emails. So.
And I would like to also add AAUW.
Yep.
We do advocacy work on education, public schools, funding, and of course, women and girls. So if you're not part of AAUW, I would suggest that you could also consider joining our program, and we have some membership forms in the back for the people that are in person. I have another question. Current PA funding for vouchers comes solely from diverted tax dollars. Is that correct? And does that mean the amount is capped, or is it?
Yes, diverted tax dollars are the only source of voucher funding, and it is capped at $525 million a year. And so if they want to expand it, that has to happen through the legislative process, as opposed to other states where they say, anybody can get a voucher as long as you meet these criteria. And so they'll start off with kids with disabilities and children of veterans who are in low performing school districts. And so it's real tiny, right? And then the next year they'll say, those kids, and then also, whatever, kids who live in rural areas because they don't have the opportunity, and then they expand it, and then the expansion is not tied to a dollar amount, right? And that's where they end up in the budget process, because they don't say we're gonna have $300 million first come, first serve. They say anybody who's eligible gets a voucher.
Another question that bothered me about Shapiro at the end, when you said that he doesn't like vouchers, but he does like scholarships. We know how those words are changed. Does he understand that sometimes they use scholarships, but they're still vouchers in disguise?
I think he understands that. He's a tough one to understand. Do you know what I mean? I don't fully know where he's coming from, so.
Okay, another question we have from our audience. For context, what is annual PA expenditure for education?
I should know that. Do you know that, Jackie? Is it like? I mean, it's billions, $12 billion for the state. I mean, because there's state funding, but then there's also all the property taxes. I think altogether it's probably like $26 billion, but don't quote me on that. I would have to check. I'm sorry that I don't have that number. It's a lot. We spend a lot on education in Pennsylvania, for sure.
13.3 and 21, 22.
Okay, from the state.
Yeah, just from the state.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's probably gone up by another
Yeah.
$1.5 billion, $2 billion, so.
Isn't that low though for other states?
Yes.
Don't we spend less in Pennsylvania on education than other states?
Yeah,
than
so-
other states?
Yeah, the state share of funding is really, really low, right? So the state, I don't know exactly the percentage now, but it's usually around 38% of what we spend on K-12 schools comes from the state, and then the rest comes from property taxes. So when you look at the overall amount, it's actually a lot. But when you look at the overall amount, you're really masking, like, the disparities in what you see in districts. So like, you have these super wealthy districts where you can raise taxes just a little tiny bit because there's so much property wealth, a tiny, like a $500,000 increase generates millions of dollars, right? Then you have other communities where like, there's no property wealth. That might be a totally rural community where the only people who are there and the only taxable properties are homes and farms, right? Or it could be like a suburb or a city where there's like a lot of nonprofits and there's just nothing to tax. And so that's the crux of the school funding lawsuit, is that the poorest communities are money in the communities that are taxing at the highest rates. And no matter how high they tax themselves, they can't provide what their kids need because our state share of funding is so low.
We have another question. Why don't tax dollars follow the student? Shouldn't a parent be able to choose the best education for their student?
So, yeah, I mean, I think that's what the voucher supporters say. I mean, I think the other side is that, you know, we collectively have an interest in having educated children, and that our communities are much stronger when we have a system that is built to educate all kids and make sure that we are not picking and choosing and leaving kids behind. And so our public school system, they take every child who will walk through their door, and while they are not perfect, right, they are set up to be able to like help all kids. If we just had a system where you told every parent, here is $7,000, go off on your own and be merry, I think we would all recognize that that's not a system that is going to meet the needs of all children or meet the needs of our communities, right? And so, you know, if you give parents the money and say, you go take this and do whatever you want with it, you're really you're not creating like the ability to educate all kids. So I think there's just a real philosophical difference on that.
Well, by the time they find out it's a mistake, it's too late. Child has lost years.
And the public school also is defunded, basically.
Right.
I have another question. What federal interventions could assist with restricting vouchers and enforcing accountability of how resources are spent, and to aid in reducing discrimination occurring in these private institutions utilizing tax dollars?
So, you know, I don't fully understand, you know, like how the federal law could work with this. I think there's like great fear among many people about the current Supreme Court and how, at least in Pennsylvania, we do have a clause in the Constitution that says like public dollars cannot be spent at religious schools, like dollars raised for raised for educating students have to be spent in public schools. And so like the EITC program is a very sophisticated money laundering scheme so that you don't have to like take a dollar directly from taxpayer and put it in directly in a private school. That's why giving the money to the parent also like gets around that. I don't know what anybody could do at the federal level to end that discrimination. I mean, I think in Pennsylvania, they could take steps to say that you have to comply with the anti-discrimination laws in the state. Maine is a state where, I think that their public schools, there are places where there are no public schools, so students have to go to private schools. And so they've been going through this whole rigmarole about having to use tax dollars to pay for religious education in Maine. That's been going up through the Supreme Court. And Maine so far has been able to say, if you want to accept the tax dollars, you have to comply with the state's anti-discrimination laws. And the private schools that want to discriminate, like they don't want to do that, right? Especially the religious schools that want to be able to say like, no, you've got to sign a belief statement that says you would have the same belief as us. We can't admit you unless you have a letter from a pastor. So I think that like state laws, I think could really help rein in the discrimination. But somebody would have to enforce it. And I don't know who would enforce it. It's only as good as the enforcement.
And the example that you brought about the pregnant young lady to come in the board, it's not just the 10 people that's on top of the board, it's the whole board meeting. So it's everyone that shows up that she would have to be humiliated like that. It's just unbelievable. Anyway, I have another question for you. Virtually, I agree that the tracking of dollars for vouchers makes sense. Why isn't there greater clarity in how the state allocates funds for each school district? I thought there was a study of that done in the last 5 years.
So we know, I mean, so the scrutiny that public schools are held to is extreme. Like we could talk to Jackie Howe for any other school board member, you, Carleen, you understand, like when a tax dollar goes to a public school, it is accounted for 10 different ways, right? Like you have audits, you have board meetings, you show how you spend the dollars. And so that happens in public schools. It's in the private schools that doesn't happen because they're private entities. And so none of the laws that apply to the public dollars apply to those private schools.
Yeah, but they're taking
They're
tax dollars.
They are tax dollars.
And
Yeah.
if they don't have the accountability, then we have to go for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any more questions? Some of you probably picked up a pre-quiz for impact of vouchers on public schools when you walked in, and some of you were emailed or sent these questions. And I don't know if anyone had a chance to look at them. I could go over it quickly before we finish. The first question was vouchers have a variety of names, including tax credit vouchers, education saving account vouchers, PASS scholarships, and education freedom accounts. True or false?
True.
PA has 2 tax credit vouchers programs for private and religious schools. Both tax credit vouchers and cash handout vouchers have predictable costs and can be allocated in the budget.
False.
Guys are really good. You really listen. New proposed PA programs would give money to individuals, Education Freedom Act and PASS scholarship.
True.
True. Voucher programs can be changed if lawmakers and the governor agrees to the change. Yes. Collection of student achievement data for tax credit vouchers is prohibited by law.
False.
True.
True.
It is prohibited. 7, most vouchers are used to help pay private school tuition for students in underperforming public schools.
False.
Voucher decrease pressure on property taxes to fund public schools.
False.
Voucher decreases discrimination and increase student civil rights. Big false. School accepting PA vouchers are not required to teach state standards.
True.
Correct. Guys got 100%.
And then when you went to public school.
Is there any final thoughts or questions that anyone would like to
Yeah.
say?
Can you hear me? I had put this in the chat, but I was concerned about the people spending voucher money on kayaks and Disney World and golf clubs. That's fraud. I mean, it's just pure fraud. Why isn't that being prosecuted?
In Florida, it's legal. In Florida, that's listed on the things you can buy. It's bananas. It is
crazy.
absolutely bananas. Bananas.
40% of Florida, so
Uh-huh.
40% of politicians have financial interest in our school.
Oh my God. I mean, it's so corrupt. It's terrible. And it's all kids' lives, right? Like you get one chance to go to first grade, one chance to go to second grade. And when that gets blown for you as a little kid, because like you don't get it back, right? It's your foundation. It's terrible. It's not even like, ultimately, it's not even about the money. It is about the money, but it's about like, what future do kids have, right? And there are plenty of kids who are using their vouchers to go to swank private schools and their families get to take a nice trip to Europe because they get the voucher. But then there are also a lot of kids who are not in that position, who are going to pop-up schools or that in Arizona, you can homeschool. And if you homeschool, you just get the money. Right? And that's what that is also really a thing.
I could have.
Like that's the ultimate goal, is just to hand, if you have a child, hand that parent a check and they can do whatever the heck they want, whether they educate their child or not.
So the kayak is for PE.
Yeah, it is. That's, do we have a question over there? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say. What resonated with me listening to you talk about the voucher program is the fact that I'm thinking about students who, whether in rural areas or particularly in urban areas, whose parents may be on fixed incomes,
Yeah.
who are held to the accountability and
Yeah.
and financial constraint, right, of being assisted based on income, whereby if you are even 50 cents beyond that income limit threshold, you don't get any more benefits, even if you are underwaged.
Mhm.
Even if you are employed, but you are underwaged. And to think that a person who has the choice to send their child or children to a private school out of pocket versus public school, and to know that that a person would try to get the money back when you got children whose parents may be on fixed incomes, but who's still not able to really feasibly feed their family. You have children who may be sitting in school with inadequate meals at home, who may be in classrooms unable to concentrate because their stomach is growling. And to think that somebody will pocket money that they can afford to pay, I'm burnt up. Because I was that kid. I was that kid who grew up in New Orleans, whose mom was on a fixed income and who was cleaning hotel rooms to try to make it do what it do. And we didn't always have school clothes to wear. And I didn't mind. We didn't mind wearing a hand-me-down. But when it came down to being able to eat, we sneaking on the side of the cafeteria asking the cafeteria worker, can we have an extra burger to bring home to my mother and my little brother who was a baby? And to think that you have people who can afford can afford to pay, and you trying to skim off the top, that's a problem for me. And not just that, because I'm a microcosm of the macrocosm of the issues that are taking place foundationally, socioeconomically within our country, and it's sad.
Any other further questions or statements? Okay, on that note, I would like to conclude this meeting, this information, and I want to thank our guest again, Susan Spicker. Thank you so much for being here today.
The slides, they'll send their information.
Yeah, we can set up the slides.
Okay.
I'll give the slides to Sue and
They
then
can
she
send it to me.
Yeah, so if you want the slides, Sue will send them to you, and I'm so grateful for people who came out tonight, like, to come to, like, learn about vouchers when you could be doing other things, so thank you, I really appreciate it.
Well, this is an election year, we need to know this,
Yeah.
because this is not often talked about, and it's so important, especially if we value public education in our children.
I do have one other question. The companies that donate or write off tax money to this program, is that public?
Yes,
Yes,
And where do we see that?
just, Google EITC Pennsylvania.
Okay.
yep, and on our website, we have a report, and we link the spreadsheets, it's a little, it might be tricky, if you want me, I can get you the spreadsheets, they used to release them, it was interesting, they used to just publicly release them. And then you could get them from lawmakers, but they weren't publicly released. And now this last year I had to file a right to know request, which I thought was really interesting because really should be public information, but the Shapiro administration did not want it to be public information. So
That means you should share it with those slides for us.
yes, I will share the most updated spreadsheet.
Because you've already gotten the information, so
Yeah.
that means that it is.
Yeah, I will do that. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you again, everyone.
Thank
And good night.
Interesting.